Hi, I'm Amy Coots, and I'm an actor, hypnotherapist, and the founder of Acting with Courage Hypnotherapy. And in this series, I will be interviewing some fantastic actors, writers, directors, producers, anyone involved in the creative arts, and I will be asking them how and why they got into their respective careers, and the advice that they offer to other creatives to look after their mental health and well-being.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Why This? My guest today is British filmmaker Daniel Harding.
Daniel Harding is an award-winning filmmaker and owner of 23 and a Half Films, a film production company responsible for short films such as Sam, Hangry, and most recently, Dinner with Mum. If you're an actor living in London or on the south coast of England, it is highly likely that Daniel has helped you with your showreel through his highly reputable company, Daniel Harding Showreels. Daniel has been responsible for the writing, shooting, editing of hundreds of showreel scenes since his company began. Daniel Harding, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much. How are you?
Good, good. How are you feeling being in front of the camera as opposed to behind it?
Not very good, if I'm being honest. I always stay behind the camera, even for photos and things like that. I hate getting in front of them. Anyone who knows me knows I tend to duck out at the last minute. It's quite a game I play with my friends, them trying to get me on camera, but I always tend to win. So not very good. I much prefer being behind the camera. I know it's where I'm more comfortable and probably where my talents lie. So this is new to me.
Well, on that point, the more important question is why filmmaking? I mean, that seems like a very competitive industry. Why would you bother?
Yeah, it never felt like a competitive industry for me when I started, I suppose. It was kind of like a natural progression from all the things I was interested in when I was growing up. Originally, I was working at a power station when I left school. So from 16, I moved and worked in a power station as an apprentice. And after that kind of fell by the wayside because I really wasn't interested in being an electrician. Then it was a matter of kind of looking at all the things I was interested in. And at the time, it was things like films, obviously, but it was also reading and photography. And I was just getting into writing. So it feels as though filmmaking probably was the thing that enabled me to do all of those things in one go, as opposed to feeling like I had to have several different things that I wanted to do. I also play guitar and bass and a few other instruments. So that's where it sort of separated for me at that point, because it was like I could do a lot of the things that I was interested in pursuing filmmaking, but not so many pursuing being a musician, if that makes sense.
But in those early days when you quit, did you say being an electrician? Was there anyone who criticized you for making that decision or said, oh, Daniel, I don't know filmmaking?
No, I would say, well, the only people really around that time I'd made that decision was my parents and a couple of close friends. And I think my dad also did that job, or he's still within the industry. He doesn't work in a power station anymore. So my dad was the one that encouraged me to do that job. So I think his initial response was quite resistant to the idea of me quitting, because he was of mind of, why would I leave a job that I was kind of set up for the rest of my life, as the cliche goes, but it was kind of true for him. Why would you throw something away like that? But once I think he sat down with me and we spoke about why it is I didn't want to be an electrician or be working in a power station for the rest of my life, I think he understood, and it didn't take him long to kind of accept my decision. And my mum, being my mum, only really ever wants me to do what makes me happy. And she knew working a power station wasn't going to make me happy. So no, everyone was quite supportive, and I'm quite single-minded, and they know that, I think. So as soon as I've made a decision, it's kind of like, okay, well, how best can we support you moving forward? So I was very lucky in that no one was that resistant to it. But also, they didn't really know anything about the industry, which was probably a good thing, because if they did, perhaps they would have tried to persuade me not to do it. But as it is, they thought it would be a fun thing that I could try and do for a few years. So no, I was quite lucky in that I didn't really meet much resistance.
And I think that is incredibly important, because it's hard enough as it is, an industry.
Yeah.
So to have that support, I think, is really essential to moving forward and being successful. So your production company is called 23 and a Half Films. Can you tell me a bit more about how that began?
Sure. The story goes, I was 23 8.5 years old. So it would have been the time that I left university, and I had the idea of trying to set up my own production company with very little to no idea what that entailed, or what it is that I was going to do, or how I was going to generate work, or how to establish myself. All I really wanted to do when I left university, where I studied filmmaking, was to make films. That was kind of my goal, very single-mindedly, as I mentioned. My pursuit of wanting to be a filmmaker, I kind of didn't want to do anything else apart from make films. And originally the idea was to make a couple of short films and then hopefully be in a position where I could make a feature. And that's almost 10 years ago, and I still haven't made that feature film, which just goes to show how difficult and how the paths aren't clear. I don't know what word that there is that for that, but it's not knowing where it's going to kind of take you. You can have a thought in your mind as to where you want to end up, but I don't think this industry is that bothered about what you think you want. It's more going to tell you what's going to happen. So it came about because I wanted to make films, and it was just a name for myself in the beginning, because I didn't want to kind of present myself as someone who was just making films by themselves. So I thought it was more of a professional pursuit, being a production company. But it wasn't really until I started the showreel business that I was doing anything beyond 23.5 films, which never generated any money, and it hasn't to this day. All it is really is a platform for me to make work and produce work and be involved with making films.
So I guess I'm interested to know who influenced your style of filmmaking, and also what style of film would you say, if you can say, would be a quintessentially 23.5 films type of film?
I've got loads of influences, I suppose. None that really spring to mind, purely because I guess I'm of mind of trying not to be too on the nose with my influences. I know there was kind of like I guess it's postmodern, and Tarantino probably started it off in the 90s, this idea that you should like reference the films you're into and kind of almost copy entire scenes. But I whilst I really enjoy watching films, and I do watch a lot of films, I guess I'm just never very good at remembering scenes that I like and wanting to kind of replicate that. I know that's quite common for filmmakers to want to do.
Right.
So not because my style or my way of doing it's any better. It's just I kind of, when I write the script, I kind of see it in my head, and that's all I'm ever trying to shoot. So my style, I would like to think, doesn't kind of replicate or lean on anyone too heavily, but I often get told they're like Twilight Zone episodes. Pretty much every film I make, someone tells me.
Yeah, I think you might remember me telling you that I found watching your films, which we're going to talk about in more detail in a moment, reminded me of Black Mirror quite a bit, which I'm a big fan of. Yeah, they've got
Twilight Zone being
kind
of the original Black Mirror, I suppose.
Absolutely, yeah, the precursor to that, which is a very cool, very trendy style at the moment. So recently, your short film Dinner with Mum, which I really enjoyed for a number of reasons, and if anyone can get the chance to watch it, please do. It won the Audience Choice Award at the Box Festival in Newbury, and has received various mentions in other festivals around the UK. Without giving too much of the plot away, can you tell us how that film came about?
It's a difficult one, because I think that any kind of real comment on the film is going to kind of give it away, I suppose. Yeah. So we've had a few Q&As at festivals, and I guess people have often asked whether it's a personal experience. Fortunately for me, it's not. So what we should probably say is it's a film about dementia, because otherwise this conversation is going to feel a bit empty for anyone who hasn't seen it. So it's a film about a lady going through dementia, and she's trying to have dinner with her daughter, or her daughter is trying to have dinner with her, depending on whose point of view you're kind of watching it from, in which time kind of spins away from her or gets away from her quite quickly. But it's always told from her point of view of the next dinner, possibly in like a couple of days' time, a week's time, a month's time, a year's time. Very quickly, these dinners kind of turn into something time-lapsey, I would say, even though that's not really a word. It kind of moves forward very quickly and very abruptly, but always set around them trying to have dinner. And that came about purely, I think, probably from a film that I tried to make when I was at university called Stranger. That was about 7 or 8 years ago, and I never felt like I quite did it justice, even though the idea was, whilst it was similar, it is a different story. But I wanted to do all these things that I've since done with Dinner with Mum in that original story. But for whatever reason, perhaps I wasn't capable of doing it. Maybe my skills as a filmmaker or as a writer weren't there yet, or at least where they are now. So I think in my mind, that was always kind of niggling at the back of my creative mind, thinking I can do that better at some point. I'll come back to it when I'm ready. And I guess it just happened one day, it just kind of fell into my lap, this idea of this perpetually moving forward narrative from dinner to dinner to dinner, and trying to tell this story over a long period of time. It literally just came to me one day, and I wrote it out in an afternoon, and it didn't really change. I think I maybe did an additional draft, but that was just kind of like grammar and a few spelling errors here and there, but pretty much it just came to me. So I was very fortunate in that the story was kind of whole. Doesn't always work like that for me, but sometimes they do, and that's kind of great, because then all you're really doing, as David Lynch would say, is kind of pursuing that idea, or being true to that idea, and that's what I've tried to do. So in terms of like how it came about, it was pure luck, I would say, and just being ready and open to the idea, I suppose, and just kind of waiting for it. David Lynch talks a lot about catching the fish, and it very much felt like an opportunity to catch a fish. That sounds ridiculous when I say it, but it felt like that to me. It was like a whole fish. I just put my rod in, and there it was. And I kind of I'm very fortunate in that I had that idea, because a lot of people have asked me about it since and asked where it's come from, and I can't really tell you. I've had a few people ask whether it was something I was trying to say, or whether I'm trying to make a comment on how we treat people who have dementia.
Yeah.
Or I've even had one person ask whether I've done it deliberately to try and get like funding or to sell it. And really none of those are true. It was just an idea that I felt like I could do, and it'd be interesting visually and narratively. I was really excited by this idea. So yeah, just one day it came to me, and sort of 6 months probably later we were filming it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think visually it's really impressive in the way that you've tried to capture the essence of what life can be like for someone and for the people around them with that disease.
Yeah.
And in a way, I could almost see that as some sort of public service announcement kind of thing, in the way that you've shot it, because it is very quick moving. So it does almost feel like, in some ways, like a longer advertisement. You said something really interesting before, which I think could be a really good note for anyone wanting to get into filmmaking. And that was the fact that you had this idea at university, but rather than throw it away because it was no good, it wasn't realized, you've then come back to it later. And I think sometimes we throw things out really quickly, rather than maybe just saying, you know what, I'm going to shelve that. And then maybe at another time, it might be right to revisit this again. Definitely. Do you do that quite often, or was it just with that particular project?
I think I probably do it more regularly than I realise. I definitely store away ideas, but I'm of the belief that your best ideas will keep coming back to you.
I believe that too. I fully believe that as well.
Because there's obviously something going on inside you that kind of is saying, "Hey, look at me, deal with me.
Yes.
You need to do something about me." And if you're creative, or you're kind of open to being creative, you can't really get away from that. Like if you had a melody in your head. Eventually you're probably going to have to pick up a guitar or play it on a piano and just kind of work out what it is that's going on there. So I always knew I would come back to it, and because it just kept coming. It just, the idea that I wanted to have another go at it, and I guess that's why it felt so good when eventually I had the idea for Dinner with Mum, because it was kind of like a bit of a eureka moment. I was like, oh, here it is. Here's the idea. I had to wait a long time for it, but I was kind of just open to it and ready for it. But even like with writing scripts and showreels, often I'll have an idea, or I'll be very observant of people and situations, kind of walking down the street. I'm an avid people watcher, and I'll always be kind of interested in, like, if there's two people having an argument or something, what it is they're possibly having an argument about. Or if I watch someone and they kind of make a comment, and then it just stores away somewhere, and then at some point it kind of comes back when you're perhaps stuck for a beat in a story that you're thinking, okay, would this actually happen? And then you can kind of go, oh no, it definitely would happen, because I actually saw that time when that person did that thing. So I think it's really important that you don't throw away ideas, but at the same time maybe don't rush into an idea as well too quickly. Perhaps because there was more to the idea than you allowed it to be, because maybe it just needed some time to kind of simmer for a little while, and then have things added to it and taken away. Because often I've had ideas where I haven't dealt with them straight away, by which I mean maybe writing the script, because once I've written the script, they tend to be quite locked in. I don't like redrafting too much. So I kind of have to wait for the idea to be fully formed before I think about writing the script. But if you go ahead and perhaps dive in too early, then you're kind of missing something that could have made your story better. Or sometimes what's happened is I've looked back and gone, I should have realized that that thing didn't work, but I didn't allow myself the time to kind of maybe walk away from the script and come back and read it. I've gone ahead and filmed it, and then it's only once I've got it in the edit that I've realized that perhaps there's like a moment that I could have changed or made better, or something doesn't quite make sense. So it's a combination of doing both of those things, waiting for the idea to be ready for you, or you to be ready for the idea. But yeah, definitely coming back to ideas is a really good thing, I think.
Excellent.
Just be
Yeah,
patient.
I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you on that. All right, let's talk about Daniel Harding's showreels, which is how I actually originally came across your work. Can you tell actors who may be watching this what they can expect if they hire you?
Yeah, I can. I suppose it's a smaller outfit than most, I think. So I give a much more personal approach to shooting a showreel, I guess. And I can only really compare myself to some of the other ones that I know about, in which if people were to book with me, I suppose they are often in contact with me, and I'm the person who's writing the script. I'm the person filming it for them. I'll be the person editing it for them. There's no one else involved in the process of them filming with me. So even from the inquiry stage, where they often through email will get in touch, it's me who's replying. So I'll know from the very off what it is that they're after, what they're looking for, what sort of concerns they may have, because often in that first email, that'll tell me and inform me as to what sort of stage they're at perhaps, and what they're kind of interested in knowing. So I would say the personal touch, as corny as that sounds, is probably a really important thing, because I imagine from an actor's point of view, it can be quite scary to think, okay, who am I going to go with?
Yeah.
Who am I going to spend my money on?
For sure.
Especially because actors aren't exactly the richest people in the world. So you've got to kind of make an informed decision. And I like to think that I'm aware of that. But you can probably tell me why you eventually, or at some point, decided to go with me. Because it's hard for me to know what it is that I'm doing right, I suppose.
You just flipped the interview back on me. I wasn't expecting
sorry.
this.
Sorry.
No, I'm completely joking.
Because you've booked with me, you can tell me
Yeah.
perhaps without obviously bigging me up too much, what it was that you felt like.
What's actually interesting was that I knew about you a year before I booked you, right?
Right.
So
Wow. Okay.
I don't even know how I came across you, to be honest. I think I must have just been looking at who's in the area and what are they doing. So for those of you who are watching, Daniel is based in Hove, so that's in the southeast of England. I'm assuming many of you who are watching may have already worked with Daniel. So you film with people in that area, and also in London and Essex as well, I believe, which is where you're originally from.
Yeah.
Yep.
A few places as well. I've gone as far north as Leicester, which is kind of the Midlands for anyone who doesn't know. So I have travelled around a little bit, but mostly in London and the southeast. Yeah.
Yeah. So as I said, I had come across you and knew about you a year before I actually worked with you, because I think it might have been a timing thing in terms of when I was ready to get new footage, I suppose.
Right.
I guess it was a number of factors. I mean, I think I like your straightforward approach in looking at your website. You're very clear about what you offer, and that's how I am too. It's like, tell me what you offer, tell me how much, answer all my questions in the FAQs. Very fast with your correspondence in getting back to me as well. The price, again, which was something that you mentioned, the price was very reasonable, for the quality of what you get. And one of the draw cards for me, I think, because at the time when I hired you, I was looking at, I had defined what my personal brand was and what I needed, is that you write the scripts from scratch, right? So we give you a brief of what we're looking for, and then there's a bit of negotiation and a little bit of drafting of a couple of options. And it really feels like a collaboration. So I think that was a big part of what I liked, was that we were working collaboratively to put something together which suited my needs and was something that you were able to film as well. So I think that was a big part of it. Whereas you don't always get that. Often it's grab a script from somewhere and then film it. And then, like you said, like I think you've said on your website, is there's no repeated scripts. No two scenes will look the same. And I think now that there's such an emphasis, at least for me, on who am I, what's my brand, and where would I be cast, I think that is so essential that, and to me, I don't think it is corny or cliche to say the personalized touch, because I think people are craving that a lot more now.
Right.
We are in an era of being able to do so much more online, the digital age, and people doing a lot more startup businesses and working in smaller teams rather than bigger corporations. So I guess it's all those things.
We call it bespoke, I suppose.
Bespoke, yes. Yes.
Yeah, it's all geared, and it's obviously a lot more effort for me, but I feel like that was the only way I wanted to do it. I think it would have felt very cookie cutter.
Cookie cutter.
Cookie cutter.
Yeah.
That's difficult to say when you're being interviewed. Cookie cutter. If like the scripts were very similar, or it's shot in a very similar way, or if they all take place in the same location. Yeah. Obviously not to talk too much about like some of the other, because it does feel fairly competitive in terms of like showreel companies that are around. But I do like to look at what they offer, and perhaps some of the things they do well and some of the things they perhaps don't do well, but always trying to look at it from the actor's point of view, thinking, okay, how is it for them when they are approaching a showreel company, and what is it that they're probably going to be looking for? And me, if I was an actor, probably the last thing that I would want is to feel like I'm just doing a script that 100 other people have done.
Exactly.
Because then it just feels like you're doing a self-tape, right? Yes. You're reading a script that isn't necessarily for you. You're not necessarily going to give your best performance. You're not going to give your best casting type. Perhaps there's something to it that's a little bit off that they aren't willing to change. Whereas I guess when I write the scripts, which I love doing, I love writing the scripts, and I love hearing from the actor, because it's a challenge when they say, we've written a script again recently, and you've given me some examples of the sort of thing that you're going for. And I love hearing that, because then it kind of gets my brain going, and it kind of gets me interested in doing it. Whereas I think if I only ever had the same 6 scripts that I was filming from, I think I wouldn't want to do it, basically.
I guess it stretches you creatively as well to be coming up with so many different scenarios and scripts. It's a nice challenge for you to kind of keep. Do you get film ideas when you do people's scenes as well? Does that happen?
No, I don't think it has, because I'm so focused on the idea of knowing that it's only going to be 2 pages. I don't think I allow myself to think too much beyond that, because then it would just be frustrating, I think, if I was like, oh, this could be this or that could be that. But no, it does feel very separate, writing the showreels from any sort of film ideas that I have. And that's probably why I haven't really written as many film scripts in the last couple of years as I was doing before. I think a lot of my attention was around just writing film scripts, but now it's mostly around writing showreel scripts. I've had maybe web series, like a little mini series idea, perhaps, like from doing one or 2 scenes. You think, oh, this could be a web series. Like I'd like to see these characters again, perhaps doing something different. But that's probably only as far as it's ever been. Yeah.
What do you believe are the essential ingredients of a great showreel scene?
Really, I think about it from a point of view of how would I respond if I was watching your showreel? And often I just want to see you acting well. So if a scene enables you the opportunity to just do some acting, as obviously as simple as that sounds, then I think that makes for a good showreel scene. What makes a great showreel scene would obviously be the actor as well, and how much they give to it and how well they perhaps perform the character. But I'm obviously there to try and help them do that. But a great showreel scene should just be something that's played very simply, with the intention of knowing what it is we're trying to do, what sort of character we're trying to play, what sort of casting type you're going for, and basically we both just aim for that. And what a great showreel would be is if we managed to do it, because then you'd want whoever's watching your showreel to kind of see the roles, right? So I guess that's actually what a great showreel should do, is not only what I've mentioned, which is obviously the casting type and hitting the character that we're trying to play, but also get you jobs. It should do its job, right? A great showreel scene, it should get you in the door, or through the door and into the casting room.
That does come back to the actor really knowing who they are and what they're about and where they fit, and presenting something that the person goes, oh, right, immediately I could put you there. And yes, we did work again recently on another script, and I have to say again, not to big you up, but why not big you up? That's fine.
Yeah, why not?
You nailed it. Like, you absolutely nailed. I don't know whether it was my communication being clear as well, which I'm sure is also important.
Yeah,
for
definitely.
You, the specificity. Yeah. But the minute I sort of said this, and this, that's exactly what came back to me, and I was like, that's it. That is absolutely it. So Well done,
the
you.
script. Thanks. The script is only going to be as good as the communication you give me, or
Yes.
from the notes that you give me. Because if you're not clear on what you wanted to do, then obviously my script's not going to be clear. So I can only know as much as what you give me.
Mm.
But obviously, what you gave me was great because it was just enough, but not too much.
Mm.
Because sometimes people are almost presenting a novel to me, and they want to do this and the characters that, and I think it's probably because they've had an idea in their head of something that they want to do themselves, and that can sometimes busy the performance. And
Yeah.
I try to make the scripts as simple as possible. I can't remember Rachel McAdams, was it?
Yeah.
From
Spotlight.
so it's from Spotlight, and instantly I'm like, well, I know that character, great. And then I think you mentioned something else, and it's like, okay, great. So those two things in a setting that I'm thinking, okay, and then my brain can kind of like start to come up with a scenario very, very quickly. So too little and too much can kind of be a hindrance, but no, you kind of got it spot on when it comes to knowing what it is that you wanted to do and what sort of character you wanted to play. I'm thinking of this weird analogy where obviously the hairdresser can only give you the haircut that you ask for, right?
Yes.
And if you go in and say, well, I just kind of want, a little bit of this and a little bit of that, then they're kind of not going to know what you mean.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're kind of aware of the style you're going for, and I guess that's your brand that you've mentioned, then it's up to me to kind of do my role, which is to kind of help you, I suppose, is the way I kind of see it.
So specificity is key.
Yeah, but it's also you knowing you, right?
Yeah.
Which is obviously key for an actor.
Yeah.
And it's something that I feel doesn't really get taught in drama schools, or at least from the conversations I have with actors.
No.
When I ask those sorts of questions, they kind of look at you, not them all, but a lot of them look at you quite blankly as if to think, well, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Who am I?
Yeah.
It's like, well, you've got to kind of know who you are and who you're going to play and what your natural casting type is. And I don't think a lot of actors come out of drama school knowing that. So knowing that is really important for an actor, I think.
Absolutely. And I have to say, it took me years to know that. And I was trying to ask people, well, where do I fit? Where do I belong? Oh, right. Amy, you can play anything. It's like, well, you know what? I don't actually think that's true. I don't actually think that's true. And that was, that ambiguity. And you're absolutely right. It doesn't get to, I think that might be changing. And there are companies and even people I've worked with who are trying to change that for actors.
Right.
So hopefully, there will be more clarity for people coming through those schools as time goes on.
I think if you're an A-lister, if you're an actor that everyone's heard of, then perhaps you have the room to kind of spread your wings a little bit, your actor wings, and kind of try roles and kind of get lost in it a little bit. But when you're a jobbing actor and you've got bills to pay and you just need to get the next gig, you got to know what you're going to get hired as, right? You've got to know fundamentally who you are and where you see yourself going, purely because otherwise you're wasting your time.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of these productions at the level that we're at, you won't get 6-month rehearsal time or a development time to kind of talk to the director about your character and what if they did this and what if they did that. It would be lovely if they were all like that. But often, again, from the sort of conversations I have with actors, you're just turning up on the day. You might say hello to the director, but then you're expected to kind of do it. You know your lines. And you're going to start pretty much on day one. If you're lucky, you might get a couple of read-throughs of the scripts with the other actors, but pretty much you're going to have to nail it first time. And that's why I think casting directors will just go for your natural casting type, because they think, well, if you can play, I don't know, just think of a character. If you can play that and that's what you give me when I look at your showreel, she'll be great for the role. And so why not hire that person? And I guess a lot of actors perhaps are quite, they don't want to hear that maybe, because they think I can play anything, and which they can do, of course they can, but are they going to get hired for anything? Yeah, probably not.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, the word typecast used to be almost like a curse word, right? Ooh,
right.
Being typecast.
Right, yeah.
But it's a great word, and the idea of niching, and that's what is going to create a career or ongoing roles for people to work. And I mean, I could name numerous examples, but we don't have time today, of people who you will see in those same lawyer, cop roles, superhero roles. And they know that's just who they are, and that's what pays their bills, and that's what gets them the work. And then, you're right. Eventually, you can then branch out. I mean, not everybody is going to be a Kate Blanchett or like a chameleon like that. It's just not going to be for everybody. But I do want to ask though, because obviously I follow you on social media, and that's probably how I first found out about you. And you are constantly putting out content, putting out showreels that you've just filmed. So it must be quite busy and time consuming. What self-care measures do you take to avoid burnout? Or
You'll
do
have to
you
ask my
take any?
girlfriend. There's certain things that I do that enable me not to go on social media. So I do put a lot of my work out there, but that's probably as much time as I spend on it. And that might be as little as 10, 15, 20 minutes a day. It might not be long. But that's come from years of me honing that. I wouldn't call it an ability, but just the way I want to do it. Because obviously a lot of self-marketing involves being online. And what it was a few years ago is I think I was spending most of my time doing it. And I was kind of then neglecting or taking my eye off other things that were more important. So I feel like I've kind of got to a level with it, almost in agreement with it, of what it is that I need to do in order to kind of just share my work and then get off it as quickly as possible. Just because you can get trapped on social media, and then before you know it, an hour or two has gone out of your day, and you thought to yourself, "Oh no, I've got work to do," and I've just spent an hour on Twitter reading this thread about cats in Zimbabwe. Do you know what I mean? It's the kind of like, and then you're like, "What am I doing? What am I?" Especially because I work from home, and there's no boss looking over my shoulder going, "What are you doing?" So I have to be careful. So in terms of measures against it, I've kind of limited what's on my phone. There's certain things that I've got to do to get on social media. Perhaps there's a password that I don't quite know, so I'll have to go and look for it somewhere, which is written down on a piece of paper. So I think to myself, do I want to check Facebook now, or should I just do it later when I'm on the computer that has Facebook on? That little hurdle stops me.
You put little parental controls on yourself in a sense.
Yeah, because it's very hard. And as I touched upon it, I'm working from home, so I'm not in an office. I don't have a boss. I could just sit here all day and do nothing. And I think we're all probably at times prone to procrastinating. So I try not to. And there's certain things that I know are my triggers, and getting rid of them or putting them slightly out of reach is very helpful. But it's also just knowing how much to do and not doing too much and not doing not enough, because it is a tool that should be used, but it should be used wisely, I think.
And just one final thing I wanted to ask you, Daniel. So if Daniel, filmmaker right now, could go back to Daniel who was just starting out and give him advice, what would that advice be?
I think my initial response was going to be stop being a waiter, because for pretty much my entire 20s I was working as a waiter, and whilst it was great because it paid my bills, it also meant that I was probably too comfortable financially to make a go of perhaps a career. I was just kind of happy just making my films for myself, putting them on YouTube, didn't really care if anyone watched them, didn't really care if they did well at the festivals. I was just kind of happy being a waiter, making my films. And I guess you can look at that in two ways, which was I was too comfortable, so I didn't then pursue my career, or I didn't think of ways of perhaps making money from being a filmmaker. I just thought it would be my hobby. But then at the same time, I probably wasn't ready creatively to kind of venture off on my own and try that. So it was kind of, I left probably at the right time. It just felt like I was doing it for a very long time, which I was. But it was when I left eventually about 3 years ago, and I've been on my own treading water in the industry since. It was probably the right time to do it then. So so that's why it's a hard one, because if I'd left being a waiter at 23, 24, I probably really would have struggled financially. And God knows what would have happened. Maybe I would have had to have moved back home. Maybe I wouldn't have made the films I'd made. Maybe I don't know. I really would have struggled financially. So it was kind of an evil necessity. But maybe the emerging filmmaker is to not settle on one aspect of being a filmmaker. If you're to make a career out of being a filmmaker, it's probably knowing that you're not always going to do the role that you want to be doing. And I think that's what my problem was for a long time, is thinking all I wanted to be was a writer director. And anything around that I didn't want to do, or I wasn't interested in. And that kind of like the actor thing, which is you got to know your casting type, right? So it's similar for crew, which is it's only when you're at the top of that pyramid do you get the opportunity to only be a writer director, and you might make a career from that. But there's a whole industry of people who are also vying for that position, who are doing other types of jobs. Perhaps they're a runner, perhaps they're working in the lighting department, maybe they're in the back of house or the costume or something else. But we're all kind of working our way towards that. So in my mind, I'm thinking, try and see what else the industry offers you that you can kind of be involved in, and not just think about wanting to be the one thing. I think I struggled probably for a long time with that. And as soon as I let go of the idea that all I'm going to be is a writer director, a lot more opportunities come my way. Suddenly I was working on feature films because I was willing to do roles that I otherwise wasn't comfortable with or wanted to do, but then that then led on to this other thing, and then I did that, and then suddenly all the things started to sort of fall into place. And I think, yeah, that was because I let go of this idea that I was only going to do this one thing. Sorry, very long-winded answer again, but I was trying to work out the answer in my head.
I think you've given several nuggets of gold there, so I really appreciate that, Daniel. Okay, Daniel, so where can actors find you if they want to work with you?
The best place is to go to the website, which is danielhardingshowreels.com, or they can tweet me, message me on Facebook, or ring me. I think my number's on Google somewhere, which I don't really ever answer my phone, but the best thing is to go to the website and then contact me via email. And then we can have a chat about what it is they want to do, maybe their ideas of where they see themselves or what they want their showreel to do. But yeah, the website is probably the best place.
Excellent. And if they want to watch your short films, where can they access those?
So 23halffilms.com or Facebook. I have a Facebook page for 23.5 films, or a YouTube account, but it's probably, again, very easy just to go to the website and watch them there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Daniel. You've been very generous in this with me today. I really appreciate it.
No worries. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching this. And if you'd like to see more videos in this series, please remember to subscribe to Why This.